Well, hello there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. DJ here, and we have a midweek episode of, I looked at the title and Hands on SAP Dev with Q Macro. I must know it by now, surely. Thank you all so much for joining. It's a really hot day here in Manchester, really humid. We had huge thunderstorms, lightning, everything last night. Despite that, I'm drinking just made a coffee with oat milk. Yeah, really nice. I've got a new blend from Rave Coffee, a fudge blend, and it's really nice with milky coffees. Hey, hello there, Mark. Quite warm over there. Yes, quite warm over there too. Yeah, I think it's pretty warm in many places. Welcome, thanks for joining, and thank you, James, Mr. James Hale, for following. I thought you were following before, but maybe not. Maybe you refollowed. I'm not sure. And thank you also today. TJRP is a recent follower. That's really cool. So let's get going, shall we? We've got an hour. This is one of those midweek streams where we do it in the afternoon, as in now, my time, so that we can sort of partially pick up some live stream family folks over in the US. Because the time zones align for us, sort of going around the world from the UK onwards on the normal Friday stream. So one of the reasons we do the live stream on the Wednesday at this time of day is so that we can catch some US folks. So let's get going. And also, I think you know this already, but generally I think it's fair to say that the midweek live streams are slightly more off-piste. I think I give myself and I give ourselves a little bit of a wider remit, so we can talk about lots of different things that relate to dev in the SAP ecosphere generally, but maybe even maybe less SAP specific and more general dev specific, and that really is where we're going to look at today. Let me just switch to the main scene. And this one, episode 31, digging into CAP's Fiori Preview. Now, in the previous episode, which was last Friday, we had a look at that. We had started playing around with that. And it's basically something that appeared in the public CDS 3.13 release, and we'll see in what form that appeared shortly. But basically, it's like a built-in Fiori elements-based preview for the entities that you're exposing in your CAP service or services. And I started to have a look at how that was built. And it's quite interesting. I mean, you can learn a lot from reading code, and I do enjoy reading code a lot. We're going to look at that a little bit, and then we're going to play around with it and just to see how it works and get a better feeling, a better understanding of that whole thing. I did actually, having read through some of this code last week, I wrote a blog post. One second. Q macro. There we go. Oh, not that one. No, where is it? Ah, no, it's not there. It's here, isn't it? Langram. Here you go. The Observer's Book of JavaScript Style. I'll post that link. I think we had that link last time, and my post buddy Ronnie, I'm sure, put that in the channel at the time. But the content of this blog post is based upon reading some of what we're going to read together and have a look at and mess about with together today. So, hey, Srikanth, how are you doing? Good evening to you. Hello. It's great to see you. So, why don't we get started by establishing, first of all, a simple bookshop application and having a look at the Fiori Preview feature, very high level, just so we know what we're looking for, okay? And then I want to take a step back and have a little look at how the Fiori Preview is built using features of Express, which is a node package for building web servers and web services with. So we'll do that. I was messing around before. Let me clear that and that. I was messing around earlier today because I create projects and throw them away so rapidly that I decided to help myself, help myself bootstrap test projects. So I created a bookshop, a classic bookshop project with books and authors, and then archived it up into a gzipped tarball, and then expanded it. And I thought I could actually automate that. So I just wanted to show you. I've actually just posted this. In fact, if I go to there, hold on a second. If I just dot files, you can see I've posted a couple of commits today. If we have a look in the scripts folder, you'll see it here, so you can have a look at this later on. There's the script, and I'm not the world's greatest bash scripter, but I've started writing a few functions, one of which is np, new project, sets up a new project directory from a tar gzip project template. Okay, I've only got one project template so far, which is the bookshop project template. So I'll use this np to set up a working, hit the ground running style bookshop folder. So if I set, in fact, I'll just have a quick look here just to show you what this does. Really is it goes and looks in the templates directory and grabs all the directories in there. That's that thing there, grabbing the individual directory name, and then just giving me a choice via fzf, and I'll choose it, and then it goes and creates it for me. If we have a quick look in the project templates, isn't it? Project templates. All I've got is this test project and a test project.tgz and a bookshop folder, which is the one I've already set up, and a bookshop.tgz. So if I go to temp, for example, and say new project, it'll give me a selection of those two, and it just goes and creates that new bookshop, goes into the directory and lists it for me, and that effectively, if we have a look here, we'll all recognize this. That effectively is a working classic bookshop example that we can grow from. Okay, and it's even got the data, I think, deployed. Yes, here we go. Deployed to the bookshop.db file from the information in the CSV folder. So it's all ready to go. So I can say cds run, and we've got there a nice. There we go. Let's bring that up. In fact, let's bring that up there. We've got a nice working project, which is cool. And the reason I've done that just now is to show you what I mean, if you're not aware of this already, with the Fiori Preview. So, of course, we're all familiar with being able to click on the an entity definition and seeing the entity set, doing an OData query operation. There's the authors, for example. But we have this ... in Fiori, which we looked at very briefly last week, and we get, that's a bit big, we get a Fiori elements-based app that's not populated with data. Well, it is sort of populated as in there are 7 books, but there are no annotations built in. But that's fine. In fact, maybe we'll add some annotations now, see them, and then have a look how that works. Yeah, why don't we add some annotations? 1 second. Let me go into here and have a look. Yeah, why don't we not? Yeah, let's do that. npm, let's install, npm install as a development node. God. More haste, less speed. We'll use nodemon. We sort of get used to using nodemon now, and that will allow us to sort of restart automatically when I change things. I mean, we're only going to change one thing, but let's do that anyway. What I've also done, actually, what I meant to, yeah, what I've also done, temp bookshop, there we go, is, okay, so we say npx, there we go, got it there. So we can say, look for changes in any CDS or JS files in the DB or server folders and run this. So there we go, that's fine. So we've now got the, that's working again, that's fine. And what we'll do, there we go, fine, is we'll just add some annotations. We'll just add a really simple annotation here. In fact, why don't we write serve annotations.cds, annotate, and we've got here, yes, catalog service dot books. Yeah, we'll do that with UI line item. Let's see, how do we do this? Value title. We'll just give the title of the book as the thing in the line item. That should do it, I think. Syntactically okay. And now if we refresh that, ooh. Okay. Ooh, what's going on? Ah, just slightly slow there. Don't know what's going on there. Refresh that. Yeah, we get some data. Okay, so we can sort of see the whole idea of this, right? This is not about annotations today. Maybe we will do more of that on Friday. Hey John, afternoon. You know, we haven't really missed too much. And good evening, Mahesh. No, we're just sort of setting the scene. Yeah, I'm doing a lot. Well, hopefully, I feel as though I'm doing a lot better in terms of not rambling as much at the start because of the hour, and just getting more quickly into it. We're going to look at how this Fiori Preview service. I'm pointing at the screen again. How this Fiori Preview service actually has been implemented using Express Middleware. I mean, it sounds very grand, Express Middleware, but it's not actually. So we're going to have a look at that, and we'll learn maybe or look at a few nice JavaScript things on the way. So that's what we're going to be doing. Hey Hussein, good afternoon, sir. Nice to see you. Okay, so let's go back here. So that is really what we want to figure out. What's going on underneath, and that's really all I need for the bookshop. What I thought we'd do, let's leave the bookshop running for now, and go here and let's go into temp. Oh, in fact, I've got this CD episode. Yeah, I've got this episode directory now. Yeah, okay, we'll do it there. I thought it'd be quite useful for us to write together the most basic Express app and just explore what Express is all about and explore how it works, so that when we start to look at how the Express package has been used within the CDS engine, things will be more familiar. I always like to sort of step back a little bit and play around with the stuff that I know is going to be, employed by the stuff I'm about to read. So that's really what I want to do. Does that make sense? Am I making sense to you? What we'll do, I'll just press on regardless. What we'll do is we'll make a directory. How about we call it Express? That'll do, Express. And we'll npm init, and of course using the -y flag, which I forgot last time, and Ronnie reminded me of it. There we go. So we've basically now defined this directory to be a node package, which is fine. And what we want to do is create a really small app that will respond to some HTTP requests. That's all. And by doing that, we'll understand a little bit of how Express works and how middleware works with Express. I mean, middleware is something that's been around forever, as far as HTTP servers are concerned. Hey, you finally see you on live. Excellent, Mr. Solomon. Good morning to you, Christopher. Yes, well, welcome to you. Yes, this is live. You are live. Your text is live as well. It's great to see you. One thing about this milky coffee, I'm not used to milky coffee. It makes me really thirsty, so I'm going to have some water. Also, because I'm getting really warm, I've turned the fan off so there's no fan noise on the microphone, but it's really heating up now. Anyway, so yeah, that's what we'll do. So why don't we start? We might as well use the node convention here and just call it index.js. And what we want to do is just create a really simple thing to respond to some HTTP requests. That's right, yes. And I was digressing, that the idea of middleware and the idea and the way that Express works is something that's not new at all. If you think of middleware, which is a series of handlers that an incoming request passes through and is handled or not by, on its way to being resolved as a response, that goes all the way back, for example, to Apache's HTTPD, the venerable HTTP, the web server that powered most of the web right at the start. Stacked handlers, and in fact, that is one of the ideas that the developers at SAP, including Bjorn Gurka and co, took when they created the Internet Communication Manager. Okay? So the idea of stacked handlers is really, really old, and it's still around because it's a good idea. And of course, the idea of a web server framework, as implemented by Express and many other web server stuff, is that you, as a handler, you receive a request object and you also receive a response object. You can take apart the request object, look at the request object, and then work out what you need to do, and then fill the response object, and then let go and let the rest of the framework take care of either sending that to the next handler in the middleware chain or sending it as a result. Anyway, so that's generally what Express is all about. Wow, that's a lot of typing. Christopher, don't know if you got my message or able to try and catch one of your videos, but all your video titles. Yes. I could change the titles. However, I think I would suggest instead, because the videos on Twitch are ephemeral, as in they don't last very long, and they're always moved across. We always move them across to YouTube with annotations afterwards. In fact, what I'll do here is I'll show you. If you go to hands-on SAP Dev, that link there, and then you go down to catch the replays. This is a nice, well, I think it's nice, a nice list of every episode, starting with episode 0, with a short description and a title, and a link to the video. But what's more, let's just pick a random one, I've no idea. What's more is that there's an annotation blog post, usually accompanying it. It's only the last few, it's usually, I'm usually like 2 or 3 behind. Yeah, here we go, let's do this one. Is an annotation blog post, which is useful for those readers they prefer reading. You can read through the annotation, which describes what's in the video of that episode, and you go, oh yeah, that might be something I want to have a look at. So you can go click on that, or click, it's random. Click on a link here, 48 minutes in, and that will take you straight to that point. There we are, 48 minutes in of the video on YouTube. So if you're looking to do that, Christopher, and I think that's what you're trying to do, I would strongly recommend you follow that path, because then these videos that you find yourself looking at are permanent rather than ephemeral on Twitch. Does that make sense? Let me know. Just by the way, does anybody on the chat, does anybody do that already? Are you finding these replays and annotations useful? Would you like to see it done differently? Oh, okay, thanks for saying yes. That's good to know. I thought I had that on my Twitch. Twitch QMacro99. I may not, but let me just go down here. Here we go. If you have a look at here, yeah, there we go. It's down here. Whoa, go away. So that's where you want. See the schedule section, and that's the link to the main hands-on SAP Dev thing as well. So it's all there. So yeah, give me a shout if you're still struggling. Perfect. Okay, so I'll carry on. Let me know if that answers the question. Let's get rid of that and get rid of that. And where were we? Yes, we're about to create an Express-based app. So of course, one of the things we want to do is bring in the Express module, which we haven't installed yet in this project. We'll do that in a second. Const Express equals require Express. Now I'm going to follow the convention of doing that because then you can create an instance of an app from the Express that's imported with by calling that, but we're going to do that separately anyway. Now what we want to do is create the app. So const. Now, how many people out there would prefer const express to comma app equals blah blah blah? I have a single const statement. I'm not sure I like this sort of multiple const statements. Express. So that will initiate, or that will create this app service that will, once we configure it, start to respond to stuff. And then what we want to do is, well, in fact, why don't we do this? npm install express. Yeah, we'll do that. And just to be slightly interesting, why don't we have, let's say we've got a static assets directory, okay? And I'm going to copy into that a picture, I don't know, desktop, desk, profile pics, DJ, head. There we go, 2 assets. Okay, fine. So we got that. We got our assets directory with that thing in there, and we got our index file. Let's continue editing that. Okay. So by the way, I think this font's big. Yeah, this font's big enough, isn't it? So what we'll do is we'll say. Well, what we eventually want to say is, app.listen on a port. Let's say port 9000, and once that listen starts up, we can supply a callback that gets executed. So we can say, well, just console.log. Okay. So that's effectively where we want to get to. But in between instantiating this app HTTP server lump of stuff and getting it to start listening, binding to port 9000 on localhost in this case, and start responding to incoming HTTP requests, we've got to of course configure it. One piece of so-called middleware, which is effectively the handler for stuff that gets requested, is a static, is some middleware that's default with Express. You get it out of the box, and it will serve static files. And so what we can say is app.use, which is a way of saying to the server service, use this handler for this type of request. So we can say here, for example, app.use express.static. We could supply a directory name there, but we won't do that. A folder name there for the URL, but we won't do that. We'll just serve everything, and we will say, we will say here assets. So anything that comes in, and you can serve it from that. Let's serve it from assets. Okay. In fact, no. Let's do that. Okay. App.use assets. I've got an example written down here, but I want to do it bit by bit. In fact, I wonder if that will work right now. Why don't we also npm install as a development dependency nodemon everywhere. Maybe I should install nodemon globally. I don't know. I'm not keen on installing stuff globally. I wanted to take the first 20 minutes looking at a basic Express app, and then we'll dive in and hopefully have a better understanding of what we've been looking at when we dive into the Fiori Preview thing. Come on, node1. Perfect. Okay, so nodemon index.js. npx nodemon index.js. npx, there we go. Okay, good. So we'll start editing this again. Index. Okay, of course. cdep, cdex, there we go. Right, okay. Index. Very disorganized. Okay, so it's running. So why don't we go here and say localhost 9000. Oops, no, I want to put it back here again, but I'll make it a little bit smaller so we can see what's going on here. That'll do, that'll do. Localhost 9000, what's going to happen? Can't get the root, okay? So what we'll do instead is, well, in fact, what does this work with DJA head.jpg? Woo! That's a bit scary. Yes, so that is already serving stuff from the assets folder, but we can't get root. So why don't we define a handler for what we want to call the root? The root, R-O-O-T, root, R-U-O-U-T-E. Maybe I should say route, the American way of saying it. No, that's silly. So we'll define a const root, and this is where we see this pattern of a handler in the middleware expecting to receive the request object and response object and doing something. So request response, and we'll just say response dot send h1 hello. In fact, why do we have this, right? Hello h1, and then we'll have the image source equals our DJA head.jpg. That's right, isn't it? Yeah. Image. There we go. Perfect. Well, in fact, as we can see in the what we're doing here, let's do that for a second. App.get, app.get is like a more specific. So when the method is get and it's for example, the root route, the handler we want to use is root, which is this thing up here, right? So let's save that. Go back here, and we're now handling the root route, which is slash, and of course that is I've got a hyperlink to the image to me. Okay, I'm going to take that out because it's horrible. Oh no, let's leave it in for now. Let's leave it in for now. That'll do. Right. Okay. So we've got that, but we can also, well, actually, before we do that, notice that we're not really using the request object here. All we're saying is, we were sort of blindly saying, whatever the request is for the root route, just send off this bit of HTML. So by convention, if you're not interested in an incoming the value for a parameter, you call that parameter underscore. Okay, so let's save that, and it still works, right? So that's something you'll see quite a lot. So now what we'll do is we'll say app.use. Why don't we have a logging thing? Okay, so we'll have a function that takes the request argument. We're not interested in the response argument because all we want to do is console.log, I don't know, request.url, the URL that was requested. Okay, so we run that, we save that, but now we're still getting this, the throbber. The throbber is still active, as in it's not returned. But we do have this the URL that's logged. What's happening is that in a middleware scenario where you have different handlers, potentially handling the request, if a handler hasn't completely handled the request and built a response to send back, it has the responsibility to say to the framework, okay, send the request to the next handler in the sequence. So that's what we'll do. Okay, so the third parameter, notice I'm not interested in the response object, but the third parameter is something we call by convention next, and then we call next because we know we're not done. Okay, so let's just restart that, and now if I do that, it works again. And also we're logging out here the thing here. So if we say blah 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 blah, of course we're going to get an error there. We can't get it, but we get the URL logged. Okay, so I think that is probably enough to understand between what this is all about. We've got things that get called for middleware that is called for every request, like this one and this one, and middleware. I mean, this is still effectively this root function is still effectively middleware, right? That only gets called when there's an incoming GET request for the root route. So yeah, does that make sense? I don't want to go too over the top here. Should we have one more? What else did I have here? No, that'll do. That'll do. Okay. So, with that in mind, thank you, John. Thanks, John. With that in mind, let's just quit out of here now and go back to the bookshop and have a look at a bit more detail as to how this Fiori preview is working. Okay, so I'm going to kill this. Yeah, let's keep things cleaned up. In fact, what we'll do as well, because maybe we want to do some debugging with VS Code, is we'll open up VS Code. There we go. Okay, so this should be fairly familiar to you. We've got our data model here, which we all recognize. We've got our server model here, service definition, which we again all recognize. That annotations file is a thing that we added, and that's all. That'll do. In fact, why don't I add something? Yeah, let's add something else. No, let's not. Let's not bother with annotations. Right. So, how does this get served? Well, let's bring up an integrated terminal, a slightly bigger one. There we go. And I think, yeah, why don't we have a look at this here? If we go back, are we running this? No, we're not yet. So CDS run. If we go to localhost, we get this ... in Fiori. And when I search for ... in Fiori, I won't do it now, but because we did it very briefly on the previous episode, it's actually part of the server.js file, which is part of the core SAP CDS module. So let's have a look at that. In node modules, in SAP CDS, you get various bits and pieces, including this common.cds, which of course we've all seen before. But more interestingly, for what we want to have a look at here, this is what gets invoked when you do CDS run. Okay, and as you can see, hey Tom, a great additional Express middleware that complements serving static content is Helmet for setting. Yes, I've noticed Helmet is used quite a lot actually. Yes, that's an awesome tip. Thanks Thomas. Yes. And the really nice thing about middleware and the way Express handles middleware is that it really is like you can slot these things in without thinking too much about them because of the convention of the way it works. I was just about to ask you to add that link. Thanks Thomas. Ooh, that's sweet at the end. Very nice. I like that. Okay, so as you can see here, we've got require Express. We know what that is now. This is the modular Express module, which is, as you probably know, defined in the project's package. We've seen this already. Of course, the project needs SAP CDS, but it also needs Express. Okay, so we got that. We bring in some CDS functions, but we'll ignore that for now. This is interesting. This is what we'll look at shortly. But then when we go further down here, this should now appear a little bit familiar, right? So we're creating an app, just like we did in the previous example. Crazily, we're using exactly the same invocation. We're doing an app.use to say, I want to use this middleware for all requests. We're using the built-in static middleware handler that's built into Express. And if you remember, what we did was we specified a directory that contains assets that can be served, right? What the heck is cds.env.folders.app? Well, if you dig into the documentation and dig into sort of what's going on generally, you'll see that in a similar way to the way that cascading style sheets work, you have this layered approach to configuration, okay, where the file called Where is it? Is there one in here? I can't. Yes, the file called .cdsrc is almost like the root layer of configuration. But you can add to that with environmental variables and at all sorts of different levels. Okay, so, the result is that when you, in fact, let's just double click that. I think you double click it to say stay there. Yeah. When you want to look at the any given value for a look at the actual value for any given node in that sort of configuration hierarchy, you use the CDS API cds.env and then whatever it is. So cds.env.folders.app will resolve to the string app. Okay, so that's where if you've got an app folder in here, that's where it's pointing to say anything in that app folder just serves statically. Okay, and I think we did this on one of the previous episodes, maybe 6 or 7 episodes ago. We added a front end and got that served as well. Did I click that? I can't remember. So in fact, yeah, okay. Well, why don't we start before we go any further? Why don't we start and have a look to see what that really is? Okay, so we've got here. I've just hit a breakpoint. And because this was generated by CDS init, we've got a really nice launch.json already in our .vs code folder. So I can now say, hit F5 to go into debug mode and start up the service. And of course, what's being started up? What's being started up is launch.json is CDS run. Okay. Which invokes effectively the server.js. Okay, so that's why we've ended up here. Let's make this a little bit smaller again. Yeah, that'll do. So now we can see cds env folders app will result to the string app. Now, I can say, for example, debug.console in the debug.console, which is on mine actually. I should use a keyboard, really, shouldn't I? Or Shift Command Y. And I always seem to remember that because it's like, why is this broken? Oh, I'll go to the debug console. That was crazy. So we can now cds.end. And we can see all this stuff, right? cds.end folders, and we see that we've got this object inside there, and of course within folders we've got app, and so on, right? So this is a really nice way of exploring stuff. Okay, so let's just let that continue for now, because we, let's just go out there and there we go. So the next piece of middleware is something I wrote about in that blog post I mentioned earlier in the stream. Is something that will serve when a GET request is made to the root route. Okay, and there's that convention that we've seen already, which is, well, I've got this handler, this function, which takes. Now look at that, that's really nice, isn't it? This isn't TypeScript, but it can already tell. VS Code is awesome. It can already tell what type of thing that first parameter is and what type of thing that second parameter is. It's a request parameter and a response parameter. Okay. Anyway. We're just going to send some HTML. Now this is, I won't dwell on this right now, but index.html is not an index.html file. It's not a string, is it? It's actually it's an object and a property of an object, index.html. And I think Volker was talking about that on Twitter. And I've written about that particular thing in that blog post. So have a look at that if you're interested. I'm going to skip this one for a second, but just down here, you can also see another piece of middleware, which if we go down to the to where this is defined, simple logger. Let's have a look. And this is exactly the same sort of thing as we defined in our little example, where yes, we're interested in the incoming request parameter because of course we want to log out the URL in this case, and here we're also logging out the method. We're not interested in the response because we're not going to send a response, but what we are interested in having access to is this magical function that we need to call if we we, this particular handler, are not done, we haven't satisfied the entire response, satisfied the handling of that response. So, and that function is given as the third parameter, which we can then call. So this is exactly the sort of thing as we did just now. We logged something out, we're logging here the method and the URL, and then we call next, which means that then the middleware will go on to the next handler, right? So that's good. That's good. So now let's have a quick look at this Fiori preview thing. Well, actually, before we do that, look, there we go. We go blah 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 blah, and this CDS serve is sort of beautiful shorthand. CDS serve these things .in app. So this is a way of adding more middleware effectively to the Express server. And that particular middleware, of course, is the CDS cap engine, Node.js engine, that will therefore respond to all the requests that relate to the OData operations in the services that have been defined. And of course, we're saying here, well, let's go and get, and I write about this as well in the blog post, let's go and get the default port, which is, let's go and get the port, and would default to 4000, and then start listening, just like we started listening on port 9000 before. Okay. If we move down a little bit, what we can see here is that this index object has a so-called accessor. So rather than an object have just a property, you can also define functions and have this special accessor keyword before it. It's quite rare. Again, I described this in that blog post earlier on. Where's my blog post here? Here we go. If I click on that, will that come up? Yeah, let me just show you what I mean. Access or there we go. Where is it? Destructuring. Yeah, here we go. So have a look at getter and fake filing in that blog post there. Chat pause due to scroll. So we've got this index, and then we've got an accessor HTML. So index.html will call this function to run, and this function, all it does, it does a little bit of stuff here, which is, does a Fiori.html file exist in the app folder? Okay, and then this HTML is one of these super what's the phrase with the backticks, string expression or something, right? Is it called a string expression? I can't remember what it's called, but basically it allows you in JavaScript, this is ES6, to have, first of all, multi-line strings, but secondly to have a way of bringing in dynamic values into that string by means of this $curly brace thing here. So $curly brace has Fiori HTML, which of course is this thing here, which is a Boolean. String templates. Thank you, James. I knew you'd let me know what it was. Thank you. String templates with expressions in it, right? I guess that's why I thought of expressions. I don't know. So we can see here that if it's got a Fiori.html file, it will put also a link to that Fiori HTML file right at the top. So in fact, the where are we here? Localhost 4000. Where are we? Localhost 4000. No, smaller again. It will put a link sort of further up here, right? To the Fiori.html, and then it continues to use the CDS API to see what services have been defined, and within that, what actual entities exist. Let's get rid of this. There we go. What entities exist within each of the services? And of course, as you can imagine, it builds up this list of links here. Authors in this case, and books in this case. Oh, Shell, can you just shut that door, please? And that. Oh, sorry, just distracted there for a second. Blah 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 blah. Where are we? Yes. So, and in those links, there is this A class equals small, href equals $Fiori Preview. Okay, we'll look at what the result of that expression evaluation is in a second, and you can see this I guess that's a horizontal ellipsis in Fiori. Okay, Fiori elements list page. And if we hover over here, make that a bit bigger. If we hover over here, Fiori elements list page. So that's where it comes from. Okay. Now, why don't we go here, so we can have a dig in a little bit to some of these things here and understand a bit more about, a bit more about what's being sort of pulled apart and diagnosed, and then we can understand how this build query parameters works. So if I run that again, there we go, debugger attached. Now I'll have, addressing use. Of course, hold on. Let's go back to there. I'm running that there as well, of course. Yeah, okay, now we can do it. Now it should work. Okay, that's good. Now if I go to here and hit refresh, we reach here, and now we can see, for example, cds.service.providers. We can go to the debug console, cds.service.providers. We get some data. I mean, it's not that exciting actually. We can see here cds.service.providers.map x to x dot path, for example. There we go. So there's only one service, which is the bookshop service, and there's the path /bookshop, which is the path that Express will use to serve that stuff there. Anyway, there's all sorts of things you can play around with there. What I also found is originally when I was exploring here, I was console logging stuff out in the debug console, and I wasn't seeing it because the output of console log was going to the terminal. Okay, it goes there, hello to the terminal. So what you can do in your launch.json is, there it is there, let's put that down a second, is go down here, and instead of the value for integrated terminal, you can have internal console, right? VS Code debug console. And now, when I relaunch, I guess, will that relaunch it? Yeah, I guess so. Let's go to the debugging console. Oh, I launched it in the wrong place. Let's go back again. Terminal, there we go. Let's run that again. Y. There we go. And now I can say console.log hello, and it ends up here, which is much better, right? So there we go. String template is the out term. Always get them confused. Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can look. JavaScript ES6 string expression. It's to do with template literals. Template literals. There we go. Yes, that's what they're called, obviously. But thank you, James. So that's how that works. Let's just kill that again and continue. Right. Let's move this out of the way. What we can see here is we've got this Fiori Preview, where we're calling a function in Fiori Preview called build query params. And by the time we get to here, we're effectively looking at, let's get rid of that again, we're effectively looking at, let's go to here, looking at the service names and each of the entities within that service. So we're going to get catalog service and books and catalog service and authors. So that's how you can see this page builds up. And the exposed entities, okay, so we're mapping over the exposed entities in a given service. They're determined by this function here, which is like internal function, I guess, underscore, starts with an underscore, which goes through and just checks to see whether any of those entities have CDS auto expose as an annotation, or whether they're sort of they're localized entities that have been defined or auto-generated because of localization, etc., etc., and all those ones that are normal entities, not these special entities, come back as the ones that are exposed. And in our case, we've got the authors and the books. So why don't we have a look now at the Fiori Preview? Okay, so this is here, Fiori Preview. This is a piece of middleware. So Fiori Preview here is used in this expression here, app.get, what's a call to the app.get function. Now, this just irks me a little bit here. Are we still running that, by the way? No, good. Because there's sort of double escape here, because it's in a string. What you can actually do, it turns out, is turn this into, you can actually use regular expressions rather than strings, regular expression objects. So you don't need the double escape of the backslash, or the double escape of the dollar, rather, because you're escaping the dollar, but you're escaping the escape. So this looks a bit nicer, and that will work as well. So let's just save that. So this says when there's a request, a GET request that comes in for /$Fiori Preview, and whatever follows it, use this particular middleware to handle that request. So why don't we have a look at that Fiori Preview middleware, which is here. And I think you can just jump straight to that. So here is inside of SAP CDS lib utils, we get the Fiori Preview.js, and there's all sorts of bits and pieces at the top here. However, the important thing to see is that this Fiori Preview middleware this middleware module exports a couple of functions. The middleware function itself, which is used here, but it also exports this thing called build query params, which is just a helper, really. It gets given a service name like catalog service, and it gets given an entity name like books, and just returns a string which effectively becomes the query parameter on the URL. If we have a look here, in fact, why don't I run this? Let's go into the terminal and run it. CDS, oops, where are we? CD temp bookshop. Can't even see what I'm doing. Hold on. CDS run. There we go. Right. So if I run that, if I hover over there, well, in fact, when I select it, books, we can see that the URL, that might be a bit small on the screen, but I've got this huge 4K monitor. I can't figure out how to make this bit bigger. We got $Fiori Preview, and then we got a question mark, which introduces the query string of the URL, and then service equals catalog service there, ampersand entity equals books. Okay, so this is a bit of a helper function that's exposed by this module and used here when we're building up these URLs. There we go, Fiori Preview .build query params. Okay, and we can access that function because we've actually required the Fiori Preview module. Okay, are we all still with it? Am I still with it? Yes, I hope so. So we've got the middleware, and this looks slightly different, but I think it's because, I'm guessing it's because it's maybe the first version of this, and I personally, I'm not keen on the way that this looks, because it doesn't really follow the convention that we've seen on this live stream episode until now. Let's just pull this apart a little bit, but before we do, let's see what this middleware does. The middleware is something, as we know. 6 minutes left. Yes, 6 minutes left. Exactly. This is more or less it, right? Is something that takes a request and a response object, and then sends something back. So there's the response. You can see a call here, response.send, and it sends the result of calling _HTML with this manifest object. Okay. So the manifest object is generated by the _manifest function, sending it the query. So why don't we actually breakpoint there and have a look. Let's go back to the terminal, kill that, let's run it in debug mode. Ooh, Is it started up yet? Debug Console. Ah, it's now launched. There we go. So there we go. So we get the query, which is an object that contains properties that relate directly to the properties, as it were, the query parameters in the query string of the URL. So service equals catalog service, entity equals books. And it passes that to this manifest function, underscore manifest function, which will generate a UI5 Fiori elements manifest file, which of course, as we should know by now from previous episodes, is the central thing that powers most of the stuff that that gets generated on the screen when you're dealing with Fiori elements. We'll have a look at that. And of course then the response.send just sends that back. Ideally, just to sort of make sure we understand how this works in general, ideally we should really call this let's change that, request response, and then we can say request.query. That's better, isn't it? And then response.send. Okay, the curly braces round query before was, I'm sure you know what it is, destructuring, because of course the thing that's passed in as the argument is the request object. And if you have curly braces query, that's shorthand destructuring, saying I want to define this parameter called query, and it should take the value of whatever the value of the query property of the incoming object is. Destructuring is super powerful and super beautiful, but you've just got to understand what's going on. So theoretically, if I rerun that, that should still work, right? Okay, that's the same thing. I'm going to refresh that. Is it launched? Yeah. Let's refresh that. Oh, of course I stopped on a breakpoint. There we go. There we go. So that's working. Come on, come on, come on. There we go. Okay, so that's fine. So hopefully we understand that a little bit better. It's a little bit less mysterious now. It's sort of using the conventional parameter names. And finally, let's just kill that. Finally, in the last couple of minutes, which is really where I wanted to get to, let's have a look at how this actually works. So the manifest, all that is a function that returns a massive string. Okay. Now the manifest is built up as a JavaScript object, and this manifest should look familiar. It's got the data source, you've got the main service. The main service's URI is the path of the service. So catalog service, right? That's of course the path of the OData service route. Oh, there's a massive butterfly. Is it a moth or a butterfly in the room? Ooh, it's quite exciting. Can't get out. God, it's huge. Oh well, I'll have to get out in a minute. And we have the rest of the manifest down here, and this is where, of course, you can imagine the route definitions or the route definitions. I'll put my American hat on for a minute, and the target definitions are, of course, also essential here. But of course, they have to be dynamic because of the we don't know we only know at runtime what the entities are that are being served for this given service. So yeah, that's how it works. And once we've got that, okay, and there's a little bit more jiggery pokery here in terms of going through the services and going through the entities and just defining the routes within the routing part of the manifest. That's a beautiful thing about the manifest being structural and declarative. We can manipulate it dynamically, because it's just an object. And all we do now is we return some HTML, okay, with the regular UI5 bootstrapping, and then we return a shell with a component container, and it's got this component, which is the component that we've got defined a bit further down. But the key thing is that we can supply to that component the manifest in line, and of course we have to stringify it purely because that's the only way really we can get a hugely complex JavaScript object into a string. Okay, And that's it. That's how it works. So there's no magic really. Or if you look behind the curtains, you see where the magic is, which is here. This is really the simplest thing that could possibly work. And I think it's beautiful. I've learned a lot from looking at this code. And hopefully in this session, there's been some demystification. You'll feel maybe have some bravery and have a look at this to see how it works and start playing around with this, which will give you confidence hopefully as well, like it's given me, to play around with annotations more. But we'll look at that on Friday. Right, the hour is up. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope that was interesting. It's very warm now, so I'm going to put the fan on and say goodbye until Friday morning, Manchester time. I'll see you again. Thanks very much. Oh, thank you, Mr. Maru, for following right at the end. Perfect. Bye now.